Well, people, welcome back to the Word Grace Abounds podcast, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Anna, and I'm the host of this faith-driven podcast where we talk about Bible, Jesus, and God. And today, actually, to be completely honest with you, I had no idea what to film about, and I felt like I should film something today. And I was thinking that maybe I could do something slightly lighthearted or whatever, but as I was taking out my microphone, I suddenly felt God impress a title on me. I am church hurt. Now what? And it feels very clickbaity, but honestly, it just popped into my head. So I thought that I should talk about it. And you might notice that my environment is different. That is because I am back in the UK, where I am studying applied translation studies. So that is why my room is different. So to kind of end that little parentheses, let's discuss the topic, because it is a very contentious topic, and it is a very, I want to say, talked about topic. It is definitely something that I've heard more and more with each passing year. Although I do believe that this topic has never quite gone away, and church hurt has been something since the beginning of Christianity and beginning of religion, because any church can hurt you regardless of religion. So to kind of explain what it means, in case you are not a Christian or a believer of any kind, church hurt, as defined currently by me, because I honestly didn't check any dictionary, is simply the fact of being hurt either by the outer church, like church with, I guess, a big C, which means being hurt by the way church acts around the world, not just localized, or it can also mean being hurt by a very specific congregation. Either you went to your local church and you ended up getting hurt by them, either voluntarily or involuntarily, or you went someplace else, another place of worship, and you got hurt there, etc., etc. And to kind of define hurt, because it is something that should be defined better, it usually is, or at least it should be, defined as people, not just people being unkind to you, but people who want to actually do you harm, to force you into boxes, to force you into accepting certain ideologies that are not necessarily in line with biblical doctrine, to lie to you and manipulate you, and to make you question yourself, your own identity, and your own beliefs. And I say that it should be defined this way because often enough, what I have heard especially from more liberal leaning individuals, is that they have been churched simply because their own ideology has not been validated. And what I mean by that is they went to a certain church expecting to be accepted, and for their, and I say this as kindly as possible, for their ideology to be accepted. But it wasn't simply because the people over there were trying to keep in line with biblical doctrine. For example, if the Bible speaks on homosexuality being a sin, it is not necessarily hurtful for someone to tell you that engaging in such a lifestyle, it is a sin. It would be extremely unkind for them to tell you you are not allowed to come at all to church, or for them to ostracize you. That is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is simply someone being like, oh, we believe this here. And if you do want to become a practicing Christian, we believe that everyone should put away all of their sin, which includes gossip, lying, slander, libel, hating your brother, murder, and a lot of other things, idolatry, stealing, everything else. So personally, what I hold to is that someone simply stating biblical truth is not hateful, and we are sorry, and I am sorry when we offend either voluntarily or involuntarily, because a lot of people are hurt simply because they misinterpret our intentions, or sometimes we just don't express things the way we should express them. We don't always have the correct words on hand, or we're not always able to express ourselves in the best way possible. So now that we have discussed this topic actually is inspired by events that I've had in my life over the past couple of months. Without going into details, I was hurt by someone in church, someone I held very dearly in my life, someone I respected and admired a lot. And someone who wasn't an elder or a pastor. They were another, I mean, they are another because we're still in church together. They are just another church-going person, another church-going member, another Christian. We are around the same age. And I decided to talk about this topic because it is something that definitely happens to all of us. It is impossible to be in any relationship, whether it be friendship, marriage, or you're going to a club or a society. Just the fact that we live means we are going to get hurt by other people, whether again voluntarily or involuntarily, because a lot of things happen voluntarily. People sometimes are unkind voluntarily. A lot of times they are involuntary. They don't realize that they hurt us. We also don't always communicate clearly that we have been hurt, and miscommunication and breakdown of communication happens quite often. And it brought back to me a lot of scriptures on relying on God, on forgiving. If I recall correctly, it is Matthew 8, where Peter comes to Jesus and he asks him, "How many times should I forgive, Lord?" And Jesus tells him, "I tell you, 7 times is not enough. You must forget 77 times, or 7 times 70, or 70 times 7, or something like that." And Peter was actually thinking he's generous, because according to Mosaic law, you have to forgive someone 3 times or something like that, and then you can kind of move on. If the person continues sinning or continues hurting you. But Jesus tells him you must continually forgive someone. And then he gives Peter a parable where a master forgives the debt of his servant, and then the servant goes out and tries to collect a debt from another servant of his. So I think like the hierarchy was master, servant 1, and then servant 2. And servant 1's debt was forgiven, and he tries to collect from the second servant, and the second servant does not have the money. And instead of forgiving him his debt, just the way the master did for him, servant 1 puts servant 2 in prison, or threatens him with prison. And this whole situation gets back to the master, and the master calls servant 1, and he's like, "How dare you do this when I forgave you? It is very hypocritical of you." And it's the entire situation that I was in and that I am in really brought back to me a lot of scriptures about forgiveness, a lot of scriptures about the Lord being our friend, and the Lord being close to the brokenhearted. And it put the Bible into perspective back again, realizing the fact that Jesus knew. Jesus knows the best what it is to be heard by the church, especially because he was crucified by religious people, or theoretically religious people, because he does call themselves a brood of vipers, and they were not actually holding to the commandments of God. They were holding to man-made commandments, laws that they made for themselves, and that if anyone wasn't holding to them, they allowed themselves the freedom to bash everyone else. So, and saw themselves as more holy. So it really reminded me how the Lord and why the Lord tells us to forgive. And it also brought a question to my mind that I'm still researching, and I'm still not entirely sure what the difference is, how to navigate these issues, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. But it made me wonder what the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation is, and whether one can forgive without necessarily being reconciled, which is kind of what I have gotten as an answer through research and through asking other people, that you can forgive, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be friends again, or you have to go into that relationship again with that person who hurt you. For example, if you have a parent and your parent has done something and they do not repent, it is on you to forgive them, but it is not necessarily on you to continue engaging with that person. So I'm still not entirely sure what is happening on that front with terminology and definitions, and on my own stance, whether we can have forgiveness without reconciliation, or if they are inextricably linked, and if I forgive someone, I have to be reconciled to them. So to kind of bring back the discussion from my wanderings, it brought back into perspective how intentional the Lord is. He knew everything that would happen to us, and He put in place steps that we can take and steps that we should take in order to both restore our relationship with someone and our relationship to Him. He has words that are timely and purposeful for every moment of our life, every breath we take. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of God. And it kind of related to me in a different way when I know by now, you think I should know how intentional the Lord is and how personal He is. But sometimes I guess I forget and I need reminding. And it just reminded me in a very powerful and personal way that the Lord is there and that He has forgiven me, which is why He expects me to forgive in return. And also that this act of forgiveness isn't necessarily a thing that will happen momentarily. As in, theoretically you can just say, oh, I forgive, and then that is that. But sometimes it takes effort, daily prayer, and dying to yourself daily in order to forgive that person who hurt you, in order to forgive the church who hurt you, in order to be able to separate these feelings from the reality that we are living in and the reality of God working in our lives. And I'm not saying any of this to discredit the hurts that have happened to either me or any anyone who has been hurt by the church. In a lot of cases, actual crimes have been perpetrated, and in those cases, people should be held responsible legally as well, not just spiritually. But in a lot of cases where we don't necessarily have legal crimes happening, and it is just more of a breakdown in communication, or people being unkind and displaying unchristian behavior, it is something that this is harder to navigate, and I'm still unsure of what systems are in place scripturally speaking, and it is something that I'm still researching and thinking on. But in those scenarios, um, it has been brought to my mind that forgiveness quite often is a war. We are at war not against flesh and blood, but with principalities. So we have to put on the full armor of God, and I'm speaking in very very biblical terms right now, drawing on Ephesians and drawing on Romans and drawing on all of these things. But what it all means is basically that we have to be persistent, we have to be consistent and disciplined, and we have to keep our focus on Jesus at all times, because otherwise we will spiral. And it has happened to me so many times during these past few months, where I have to forcibly, almost like I am holding a leash, a dog on a leash, except the dog is my thoughts, and I am leashing them, and I am drawing them back to God in a literal physical manner. And it reminds me also of, it wasn't Titus. It might have been Ephesians 4, where Paul says that we have to put on the new man because we have been sanctified, we have been washed and justified by his blood. So it is a very literal act of taking off our old self, of separating ourselves. And sometimes it can even mean, like, if I'm spiraling, I go out on a prayer walk. Or if I'm tempted to eat something I shouldn't, I step out of the room. So it is in a very physical sense, not just spiritual sense, that we have to put in the effort of drawing our mind, leashing our mind, and drawing it back to the Lord. And it is something distressing when we are hurt by someone whom we trusted, or even when we are hurt by someone who we don't even know. It can be very distressing, and it can be very, how do I call it? What is the opposite of edifying? It can really break you and resonate with all of the insecurities you didn't even know you had quite often, or insecurities you thought you'd moved past, but you are being brought back to them, and you are being brought back to battles you thought you had won. And it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort to distance yourself from your thoughts, and to basically not allow your mind to take over, and to understand when it is healthy to give in to certain thoughts and to analyze certain thoughts, and when you need to stop because you are just doing yourself this disfavor. You are just being unkind to yourself in return and sort of punishing yourself when you shouldn't be. So in conclusion to this discussion, I want to specify that I am not in any way, shape, or form supporting anyone who has hurt someone, because I myself hurt people all the time, voluntarily and involuntarily. I am not afraid to admit that I am a person who can often be insecure. I can often tell white lies to minimize what I have done, or to protect the identity I have constructed, or the identity that I think I have in my head, an identity that validates everything I say, and which I shouldn't protect, because in truth, that identity is created by a sinful creature. And I should look towards Jesus and what he says instead of validating myself all the time. So, all this to say, I am not in support of anyone perpetrating hurt, but I am also looking at it. I'm trying to look at it from an objective lens, especially as someone who has been hurt, that I understand why so many people turn away from church, because I myself turned away from church until I was 20. Why so many people don't want to engage with any religion. But looking back, I can see that the only thing that did end up saving me was Jesus. It wasn't other people, though it is incredibly uplifting to be able to go to church and to see so many people loving God and so many people actually committed to the ideals of the faith and to portraying the Lord and being ambassadors for Christ in the way that we should, and standing up for what is truthfully just and truthfully righteous, and not submitting to gossip or to other things for the sake of I'm trying to find better words, but I don't have better words because I didn't script this. I'm trying to be more upfront and more natural, and sometimes it just doesn't work quite how I imagined. But anyway, the entire point of this video was to extend an olive branch to those who have been hurt, to tell you that I know where you're coming from. I have been where you're coming from, and sometimes I still am where you're coming from. But at the same time, it is to hold all of us accountable, that we cannot run away from our problems. We have to face them. Sometimes we have to hold people accountable if there are legal crimes being perpetrated, but we also have to hold others spiritually accountable, and that goes on both sides. And all of that is to say that Jesus does see you. Jesus knows exactly how you feel. He has been hurt in the worst way. His life was taken from him. I mean, he laid it down of his own accord because he knew what would happen, and he chose to come here to save us, to give himself up for us. But his life was violently taken away, and he suffered in the worst way possible. Not just physically because he was crucified and he died from asphyxiation, but because the cross was a symbol of shame. So they tried to steal his dignity by doing what they did. So Jesus knows exactly what we're going through. He knows it much better than anyone else. And he is there for us. We can connect with him at any time of day, either through prayer, through song, even through silence. We just have to think of him, and we just have to reach out to him. And he always, always reaches back to us. So I will leave the podcast here, and I hope to see you next time. God bless.